They were called barbarians, a word spat with contempt in marble halls and carved into textbooks centuries later. A word meant to separate civilization from chaos. Rome on one side, everyone else on the other. But deep beneath the ruins, beneath shattered helmets, collapsed villas, and forgotten graves, there is evidence that refuses to obey that story. Bones don't lie. Teeth don't care about empires. And DNA does not recognize the word barbarian. When geneticists began extracting ancient DNA from Roman-era skeletons, powdered from molders, drilled from dense inner ear bones, teased from soil that once touched human blood, they uncovered something deeply unsettling. Something provable. Something quietly explosive. The Roman Empire, long imagined as a biological core surrounded by invading outsiders, was never genetically pure to begin with. Not at its height, not at its beginning, not even in Rome itself. The contradiction sits at the heart of history. Textbooks describe waves of foreign barbarians overwhelming a Roman population. DNA reveals a population already transformed, long before the first sack of the city. This is not a story of Rome versus the world. It's a story of the world inside Rome. The traditional narrative is clean, comfortably simple. Rome rises from Latin roots. It expands. It civilizes. Then, centuries later, Germanic tribes, Huns, Goths, and Vandals crash in from the outside, bringing foreign blood that dilutes and destroys the empire. But ancient DNA tells a messier story, a human one. When researchers analyzed genomes from cemeteries across Italy, Republican-era burials, Imperial graves, late Roman skeletons, they didn't see a stable Roman genetic signature being disrupted by outsiders. They saw constant movement, continuous change, an empire built on migration from the start. Early Roman remains, dating before imperial expansion, cluster genetically with local Iron Age populations of central Italy. That part holds. But then something dramatic happens without a single battle being fought. During the height of the empire, Rome's DNA shifts sharply east and south. Not subtly, not gradually, abruptly. Individuals buried in Rome between the 1st century BCE and the 3rd century CE show strong genetic links to the Eastern Mediterranean, Anatolia, the Levant, North Africa. These weren't invaders. They were citizens, slaves, soldiers, merchants, wives, children. The capital of the empire was no longer genetically Italian. It was global. This is the moment where history cracks open, and moments like this, where genetic evidence quietly dismantles inherited myths, are exactly why GenealogyX exists. When written records grow biased or silent, DNA keeps speaking. Subscribing to GenealogyX means staying connected to the truths carried forward in human bloodlines, long after empires fall. The science behind the shift is precise, not speculative. Ancient DNA, fragmented, damaged by time, was carefully reconstructed and compared to thousands of modern and ancient genomes. Autosomal DNA showed overall ancestry. Mitochondrial DNA traced maternal lines. Y-chromosome markers followed paternal descent. Together, they told the same story. Rome didn't become diverse after it conquered the world. It became diverse because conquest required movement. Legions recruited from provinces, grain shipped from Egypt, administrators relocated from Syria, enslaved populations transported across continents. Every policy decision left a DNA footprint. And here's where the barbarian myth begins to unravel. When the empire entered its later centuries, when Gothic names appear in Roman records, when historians describe foreign warbands settling inside imperial borders, geneticists expected another sharp shift. They didn't find one. Late Roman and early medieval DNA in Italy shows continuity, not collapse. In many regions, individuals labeled barbarians in historical texts were genetically closer to earlier Romans than the imperial population had been to the city's founders. The so-called outsiders were not biologically alien. They were already part of the empire's genetic web, descendants of soldiers, migrants, provincial families who had lived under Roman rule for generations. The word barbarian was cultural, political, not biological. One burial makes this impossible to ignore. A high-status grave from late antiquity, complete with weapons traditionally associated with Germanic warriors. For decades, it was cataloged as proof of foreign invasion. DNA analysis told a different story. The man's ancestry traced back to southern Europe and the eastern Mediterranean. His lifestyle markers, diet, bone stress, matched Roman urban life. His barbarian identity was worn, not inherited. Identity had changed faster than blood. Another revelation followed. In northern provinces, Britain, Gaul, the Rhine frontier, Roman-era cemeteries reveal individuals with African, Near Eastern, and Southern European ancestry living alongside locals centuries before the empire's decline. Not as anomalies, as neighbors. The empire didn't fall because outsiders entered. Outsiders had always been inside. This forces a reconsideration of what Rome actually was. Not a single people spreading outward, but a system, a gravitational center pulling humans from every direction, mixing them through law, labor, violence, and opportunity. Climate played its role. Droughts in North Africa pushed movement north. Cooling periods in Eurasia altered food supplies. Military recruitment targeted regions under stress. Each environmental shift nudged human bodies across the map, leaving traces in bones long after banners rotted away. Even the feared migrations of late antiquity looked different under genetic light. Groups like the Goths weren't massive uniform populations floating into the empire. DNA suggests smaller groups moving through already mixed communities, integrating more than replacing. The fall of Rome begins to resemble a transformation, not a genetic extinction. And that transformation didn't end in antiquity. Modern populations across Italy and Europe still carry these layers. Southern Italians show measurable continuity with Eastern Mediterranean Roman-era ancestry. Northern regions preserve blends shaped by imperial logistics, not medieval invasions alone. There's no clean break. Which raises an uncomfortable question. If Rome, the empire that defined us versus them, was never biologically unified, what does that say about the categories inherited today? What does it mean if ancestry ignores borders older than nations themselves? The DNA does not flatten identity, it complicates it. It reveals that belonging has always been negotiated through language, law, loyalty, and survival, not locked in chromosomes. The Romans knew this, even if later centuries forgot. Citizenship could be earned, names could change. Allegiance mattered more than origin. Genetics confirms what power once understood instinctively. As this evidence settles, the old image of barbarians tearing down civilization becomes harder to defend. What remains is something quieter, more human, a world where people moved because they had to, where empires grew by absorbing difference, not excluding it, where collapse was not replacement, but reorganization. Rome didn't die of foreign blood, it was built by it. And today, when living DNA echoes those ancient crossings, the story comes full circle. The past is not distant, it's carried forward, in families, in genomes, in questions people ask about who they really are. If uncovering how DNA reshapes the past matters, GenealogyX is where those discoveries continue. Subscribe, because every day, new genetic evidence challenges what history thought it knew, bringing us closer to the truth written beneath the skin.